This lesson is on human sexuality. We're going to cover the male reproductive system and the female reproductive system as well. The male reproductive system's job is to produce testosterone. That is a male hormone, and therefore once testosterone is made, sperm cells can be made during puberty. Now puberty can start as early as 11 or 12 or as late as 16 or 17. So it's normal. Everyone's going to go through this process. Puberty is just at different stages and different times for each and every single person. And that's what you have to understand. Someone might have started going through puberty at age, 6th grade, while someone else might not go through puberty until sophomore year. Let's go ahead and take a look at this video here to better understand the male reproductive system.
The primary role of the male reproductive system is to produce and deliver sperm to fertilize an egg in the female. These sperm are produced outside of the body cavity by the testicles, which are located in the scrotum. The scrotum protects and supports the male reproductive organs that are located outside of the body cavity. These include the testicles, epididymis, and vas deferens. The testicles produce about 300 million sperm each day. However, this is possible only if the temperature of the testicle is 93.2 degrees Fahrenheit. The scrotum maintains this temperature by adjusting how closely it holds the testicles to the body. The interior of each testicle consists of multiple lobules, containing 2 or 3 seminiferous tubules. It is within these tubules that sperm formation begins. The sperm moves out of the tubules into the epididymis, and then into the vas deferens. The vas deferens carry the sperm upward into the body cavity. After the sperm leaves the vas deferens through the ejaculatory ducts, they pass the openings of the seminal vesicles. The seminal vesicles, which are located near the base of the ejaculatory ducts, secrete a thick yellow substance to nourish the sperm. This secretion forms 60% of the volume of the semen. Semen is the sperm-containing fluid that is ejaculated at the climax of male sexual excitement. From here, the semen travels into the 8-inch long urethra, which transports both urine and semen, but not at the same time. At first, the urethra is surrounded by the prostate gland, and then it is surrounded and protected externally by the penis that is relaxed except during sexual excitement. During sexual excitement, the penis stiffens and enlarges so it can deliver the sperm into the female vagina. During the expelling of the semen, which is known as ejaculation, the prostate gland secretes a thick alkaline fluid that increases the ability of the sperm to move in the semen. Located just below the prostate gland are the bulbourethral glands. These glands open into the urethra, and, during sexual arousal, they secrete the pre-ejaculate fluid that flushes out any residual urine from the urethra. It also lubricates the urethra to help the sperm pass through. When the male ejaculates into the vagina of the female, the sperm must travel upward through the uterus to fertilize the egg in the fallopian tube.
So let's check for understanding, make sure that we're clear on what we need to know. Where are sperm made? What does the seminal vesicle provide? What's the definition of ejaculation? You should be able to understand what those terms are and explain them. And if not, go back and rewatch the video clip. So guys, how can you be healthy? How can you keep this male reproductive system working at its best? Well, first, do realize that guys can get 3 different types of reproductive cancer: testicular cancer, prostate cancer, and breast cancer. With that being said, guys, roughly around the age of 16, when you're driving age, once a month, check the testicles to make sure that there aren't any lumps. Also take a look at the breast tissue as well. Make sure that there aren't any lumps. The prostate, a doctor does that, and don't worry about it. You don't have to wait or worry until the age of about 50, and then the doctor will check it then. Guys, you need to make sure that you keep the penis and scrotum cleaned on a daily basis to keep away any bacteria that can cause infection. Alright, now let's turn our attention to the female reproductive system. The female reproductive system is responsible for making hormones such as estrogen. Once again, the process of going through puberty is normal. Everyone is going to go through it at one time or another. Also remember that girls start going through puberty earlier than guys do. So, let's take a look, another video for you. Listen to this here.
Okay, the female reproductive system. We're going to be looking at something that we already know. This is the urinary bladder here. And you can appreciate how the uterus is resting on top of the urinary bladder, the female reproductive system. The interior of the uterus is here then, and of course the exterior would be right here. This, incidentally, this sort of blind end of the uterus is referred to as the fundus. Now, if we go to the end of the uterus, we find something which we refer to as the cervix. We'll talk about the cervix a little bit more, but the cervix essentially provides a vehicle for essentially collecting sperm as it dips into the vaginal region. It also is responsible for plugging the entrance to the uterus. This region below the cervix is known as the fornix. This is where the sperm tend to collect. And of course we're looking at the vagina here. Now at the beginning of the vagina we have the vestibule, and then we have the labia minora and the labia majora. The labia minora is the hairless lip of the female reproductive tract, whereas the labia majora, of course, contains pubic hair. Also in this region, this sort of little candy cane type thing is referred to as the clitoris. This is essentially the pleasure center of the female reproductive system. All right, well, let's go the other direction now. This is the fundus of the uterus, and you can see that there's a tube actually leaving the uterus on either side. I'll show you another model of that soon. This is the fallopian tube. Now, at the end of the fallopian tube are finger-like structures which we refer to as the fimbriae, and the fimbriae literally stroke the interstitial fluid that essentially the egg will be released into from the ovary, which is this structure here. The ovary and the fimbriae actually are not connected directly together, unlike what we see in the model here, but they are separate structures, but the ovary releases the egg, it's picked up by the fimbriae, and then the egg is going to travel into the fallopian tube here, where it can be potentially fertilized. There's a ligament right here called the round ligament that actually helps to support the uterus, and then here is a broad ligament, which we simply call the broad ligament, which for all intents and purposes is part of the parietal peritoneum, and that also supports the uterus. This represents a released egg, and you can see that the ovum is in the middle here. There's the nucleus. This nucleus is actually, if this were a released egg, it's not in the right phase of meiosis, though. This almost looks like prophase. It does look like prophase. Nonetheless, it should be in metaphase 2, so this is a little bit of a misnomer. You can appreciate the zona pellucida around the egg, and then the cellular structure on the outside are the granulosa cells. The zona pellucida basically prevents fertilization by 2 or more sperm to the egg. Once the sperm essentially works its way through the granulosa cells and through the zona pellucida into the egg, fertilization takes place, and the zona pellucida becomes an impenetrable barrier so that more sperm cannot be entering the egg at the same time. The granulosa cells are like the nurse cells in effect for the egg. They also are cells that are responsible for converting estrogens, androgens into estrogens, but not so much surrounding the egg here. That would be more follicular granulosa cells. Okay.
Yes, there were a lot of technical terms there, especially the end where you're taking a look at the egg cell itself. Just remember that once a sperm cell enters the egg, no other sperm can get in there. So that begs to differ, how do you get twins? And we'll talk about twins actually in class. The next component is the ovulation, because girls, you have similar components to males, but a little bit more complex. So the picture I have here shows the different phases of the menstrual cycle. You have the first phase, which the uterine lining and the blood leaves. This is known as menstruation. And then it goes into ovulation, the release of an egg cell from the ovary into the fallopian tube, which leads into the uterus. And that would be this phase in here. So let's go ahead and take a look at this with this last video clip here.
Ovulation is a part of the menstrual cycle when the ovary releases a ripe egg. Or ovum. Inside the ovary are hundreds of thousands of follicles. Each follicle is a hollow ball of cells with an immature egg in the center. The typical 28-day menstrual cycle begins on the first day of menstrual bleeding. During the first 7 days of the cycle, a few follicles begin to grow at the same time. These maturing follicles secrete estrogen hormone into the bloodstream to prepare the lining of the uterus for pregnancy. Around day 7, all of the follicles stop growing and begin to degenerate, except for one. This dominant follicle continues to grow and nourishes the developing egg inside it. Around day 12, the follicle secretes a large amount of estrogen into the bloodstream. When the estrogen reaches the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland in the brain, the anterior or front part of the pituitary gland releases a huge surge of luteinizing hormone into the bloodstream. Around day 14, luteinizing hormone causes the follicle to undergo a sudden growth spurt. Right before ovulation, the egg detaches from the inside of the follicle. The bulging follicle releases chemicals, causing one of the two fallopian tubes to move in closer and surround the follicle. The follicle swells until it bursts open, ejecting the egg and fluid from the follicle into the abdominal cavity. In response, the fimbriae, tiny projections at the end of the fallopian tube, sweep across the ovulation site and pick up the egg. Microscopic cilia on the fimbriae's surface transport the egg to the entrance of the fallopian tube. Inside the walls of the fallopian tube, muscular contractions gently push the egg towards the uterus. After ovulation, the egg lives for 12 to 24 hours, so it must be fertilized by a sperm from the male during this time for a woman to become pregnant. If it's not fertilized, the egg dissolves away and is shed along with the uterine lining during menstruation.
So as we continue on here, girls, how can you be healthy with keeping your reproductive system? Well, during menstrual period, you can use tampons or pads that will absorb the blood and uterine lining. That way you won't ruin your underwear or your clothes. Girls also should wash the vagina on a daily basis to keep bacteria from growing. In girls, just like guys, you can develop cancer of the reproductive systems, such as breast cancer, ovarian cancer, cervical cancer. Girls, just like we mentioned for the guys, roughly around the age of 16, once a month, check your breasts to make sure that there aren't any lumps. Ovarian cancer is on the inside. You can't detect it unless you have other symptoms. And cervical cancer is detected when you go to the gynecologist for a yearly exam. There is a new vaccine out there that prevents cervical cancer that some girls, pediatricians have started giving to girls as young as 11. So let's go back and check for understanding here. What is the job of the uterus? How often is an egg cell released from an ovary? And then think about what's the difference between a menstrual period and the menstrual cycle.